Hey everyone, Vincenzo Calla here, and welcome to Let's Discuss Politics. Today, I'm glad to be joined by the Ottawa City Councillor for Ward 7 Bay, Theresa Kavanagh. Thanks, Theresa, for joining me today.
You're welcome.
Well, it's so great to have you, and as a note to the audience, as always, make sure you're staying updated with me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, VC Productions 25, website vincenzocalla.com, and like, subscribe, and just get notifications here on YouTube. So without further ado, let's get this interview started. So our first segment is called Theresa's Story, where we'll talk a bit about who Theresa is and her political history. So first off, I always like to start off with, can you tell me a bit about yourself, your story, and how you got your start in politics?
Oh, it's a long story. It's not a recent story. I actually got involved, let's see, about 35 years ago. And what happened is I was a young mother at home, basically what we'd call a housewife. I decided that I couldn't afford to go to work because I had two kids, very young. So I tried to do volunteer work when I could and get involved in things and just look at issues. And I was thinking in terms of the world that my kids were going to grow up in, and wondering what it would be like. And somehow I was interested in environment issues and issues of equity, issues of, how things are going to change or get better or make sure they don't get worse. These were all things on my mind, as my sons were very, very small. And I think that inspired me to get involved. And I got involved with a political organization, political party, and joined there. And I got involved in a couple of campaigns and realized that this is sort of where I wanted to go. It didn't exactly fit, but it fit mostly. Well, I ended up being a candidate in 1988. So I was a federal candidate in Ottawa West. It was called Ottawa West now. It's now called Ottawa West Nepean. So that was quite the experience, because I had at that point had hardly worked. I had been somebody who went from university straight into motherhood, and I had not been in the workforce much. So, and I was going up against big guns of people who had lots of experience and who knew the ropes, as it were. So I was terrified, but somehow I got addicted to it. And right after, which I clearly did not win, I decided to work on Parliament Hill. And so I started immediately after that election. I started working on Parliament Hill for members of Parliament and continued there for almost 30 years. And during that time, I certainly learned a lot and saw the advantages and disadvantages of trying to get things done. It's tough, but possible. So I was inspired. And later on, I became a school board trustee while working on the Hill. As well, I saw that I liked the idea of working municipally. I liked the idea of making changes at the municipal level. So after 8 years as a school board trustee, I gave that a try. That is the very, very, very condensed version.
Well, and it's an interesting story, and you think about sort of like how much has happened since you first ran in 1988 in I guess federal politics, and a lot has happened since then. But now I wanted to ask you about your current position you hold. So you ran back then and you were unsuccessful, and then you went on to work behind the scenes on the Hill as a staffer. And what made you decide back in 2018 to make the jump into municipal politics and run then for councillor in Bay Ward?
Well, I had been the school board trustee for 8 years. And the story behind that was someone approached me saying, "Hey, we'd really like you to run in this area. We need somebody who's, I had the experience of having a couple of kids. I didn't have an education background, but I certainly knew the school system." And I said, "Oh, well, I'd never thought of that." So I did run for school board and I was successful. But while I was school board trustee, that's for 8 years, I got to know the community. I got to know what makes the community. And I saw a lot of things at the municipal level that could be better, making walkable communities, because I was big about kids walking to school, that kind of stuff. And it inspired me that, I'd like to be one of those people who makes communities a little better. So, and because I knew the community so well, I was representing basically the same boundaries in Bay Ward as the trustee. I thought this is good timing. The current councillor at the time was stepping aside, so I wasn't running against an incumbent. So I thought this is a good opportunity to use my experience in the community already. I had done a number of things as a trustee, including reorganizing schools in the area because of enrollment changes. So I went for it, and because I had those roots, it really helped, and it gave me a perspective of what was needed.
So let's move on to the next segment now, which is called Serving as an Elected Official, where we'll talk a bit about your experiences and achievements over the past few years as the counselor. So first off, what has been your favorite part about serving Bay Ward as their counselor for the past 5 years?
Okay,
Or
well,
four and a half.
being yeah, well, um, you got kind of a couple hats on when you're a counselor. You're working at the city level, making big decisions for the whole city. And in your ward, you're also working to improve things. I'll tell you my favorite thing about Bay Ward, and that was getting the Britannia Winter Trail started. That was a very grassroots uh, initiative, and I couldn't have done it without great volunteers in the community that came forward. I have to make that clear. I didn't do this. I just kind of threw it out there saying, hey, let's do this. And people responded. And I'm so proud of it. It's brought the community out. Who knew the pandemic was going to happen? When we started this, we did not know that. But it gave people a chance to get outside, get around at safe distances, get some exercise during those cold, hard winter months of 2020 and 2021, 2022. And it's now become a big success. And it's tied in with the other urban winter trails across the city. That's one big thing that I'm very proud of. There's a whole bunch of small things of just, making communities more livable, getting in traffic calming and measures like that. I got a big mural put up on Carling Avenue. I really pushed for that, and it involved kids from the local Ottawa community housing communities to participate. So it felt like a really good community project again during the pandemic. Who knew the pandemic was coming and was going to put such a flavor on everything? So those are a couple of the things that I'm very proud of, and just being able to outreach and have lots of community meetings and give lots of information to people of what's coming up. The one thing that's impacting me that I have to deal with is stage 2 LRT. So keeping people up to date and trying to mitigate issues that are problematic as much as possible. It's a massive project, and as you know, I just came from a meeting on the LRT, but we're very much affected. This ward has the highest impact on that construction, and I always remind my colleagues, that you don't know what it's like when you've got a train coming through your backyard practically. So I'm very proud to work with the community on those things, and it's moving along, and we hope for the best.
Well, definitely, and you actually answered both of my question. Well, the next question I was going to ask about your favorite achievements in that question too, and it's important. The LRT, we've seen a lot of issues with it. I'm not going to go much deeper into that because I'm sure it'll come up again, but we've had some issues with it, and now this massive expansion across the city is proving to have some issues as well. But it's important to work those issues out, make sure that it goes well, so we can sort of avoid the issues that we're seeing with line 1 or phase 1 of the LRT before we put out the next phase, because it would be nice to, and this is what you're working on, this is what all your colleagues are working on, to sort of minimize those delays, minimize those impacts that we're seeing with line 1 right now. The last segment is called The World of Politics Around Us, where we'll talk about a bit about this world of politics that surrounds us. So first off, the question that I like to start with is, who is or who was another politician that inspires you?
Well, I saw that question, and oh, geez, who do I pick? I think my favorite is always going to be Alexa McDonough. Uh, I felt that she was so courageous. She was such a breakthrough because for women in politics, she was one of the first women to get elected in the Nova Scotia legislature as a leader, and that was amazing. And she was so positive and um, just such strong values that I love that. I've also been inspired by many of the MPs that I worked with. I worked in a whip office, so I worked with many MPs, and I looked at their backgrounds, and I was so proud of the fact that, that somebody who was a minor in a area where that was the job that they had, could be a member of parliament, or somebody who was a carpenter or a trades worker or a nurse, and then they came to Parliament Hill and bring those experiences with them. And that's when I thought, yeah, this is the House of Commons. This is about regular, ordinary people bringing things to the table. And yes, we do have lawyers and people with professional backgrounds too, but I think that gave a special flavor to Parliament, and I was always inspired by their stories. So, but again, Alexa was a big one, and of course, I did work very closely with Jack Layton, and who wasn't inspired by Jack? He was in the office next door to us, and he was so upbeat. He had great sense of humor and sense of fun. People didn't see that side of him, and I remember that. That's important too.
And it's important to have icons that you look at and worked with to sort of guide you, and it's all those things, looking at people like Jack Layton, who had such an impact on Canadian politics, and the way that the House of Commons really was sort of shook the House of Commons in 2011, or around those years. Those years are, it's really interesting, and you worked through that, and you worked through those pretty important years, and it's really interesting. But now I want to go on to the last question, which is really interesting, and I always like to take time on, and it is, what do you think are some issues that you would like to focus on more and that need to be focused on more at the city level?
Well, I got to choose what I wanted to do more in the second term in terms of what committees I wanted to sit on, etc. And the one that I wanted to be chair of was Ottawa Community Housing. I felt that if I want to make a difference in anything, I want to see more affordable housing built. And I'm very excited by the fact that Ottawa Community Housing isn't just a landlord to 32,000 people. We have over 15,000 units, but it's also a developer of affordable housing. And I wanted to be part of that and make sure it's done well across the city. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that I hear about. I had been the first liaison on women and gender equity in my first term, and that was a great learning experience. I got to hear specifically about uh, gender-based decision making, and one of the top things you hear about is, I need a place to live. I need to have a place that's affordable, and I wanted to make sure that that happened. So this gives an opportunity, and of course we have to have partners. We can't do it by ourselves. We're partners with the city, who's our shareholder, but also we need help from the federal government and provincial government to achieve this. But I think that's probably the biggest thing we can do to make the city better. I can't forget the environment. That was the other big commitment I made to myself, is to make the city um, so much better, that we reduce greenhouse gases. And I'm very proud to be on the environment committee, but it's in everything we do. It's in everything we do. We have to make cycling infrastructure, pedestrian infrastructure. That's stage two. As much as it's a big, messy construction project, it's going to really be a game changer for our city. And I'm proud of it. And those are the kinds of things we need to work on.
Well, definitely, and sort of seeing the completion of stage two. I think it's important to. I mean, I take line one every day. I'm in Barhaven, so I bus into Tunney's Pasture, then I take the train down to U Ottawa every day, and to see that sort of expanded through your ward and out to sort of further a bit west, it'll be very helpful to myself and to residents of your ward and everybody who's not currently served by line one, sort of, well, directly in the ward. It's important for that expansion to continue, and on the environment. It's such a big part of our city. We have a beautiful city, and we need to protect the area around us, and like you're mentioning before, the Britannia area, and sort of we have so much beautiful waterways around us, and protecting that is so important.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
That is all for today. Thanks, Theresa,
Okay.
so much for joining me.
No, my pleasure. And thanks for asking me.
Well,
Take care.
it was great having you. And if you like this interview, make sure to go check out the other part on YouTube for top 10. If you're watching this at the data premiere, it's going to be coming out on Friday. So let's discuss politics as a VCalla production. Until the next video, I'm Vincenzo Calla, signing out.